Good evening. The May 23rd meeting of the Evanston City Council will come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin? Here. Councilmember Ravel?
Here.
Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Hadakatis?
Here.
Councilmember Kelly?
Walking in.
Councilmember Byrne, Braithwaite? Councilmember Wen? Here. Councilmember Newsma?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
With 7 members having answered the call of the roll, we have a quorum present. And before going to any of the rest of our business, Councilmember Newsma is recognized for a motion.
Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding vacancies in public office, discipline, performance, or removal of an office holder. This agenda item is a permitted subject to be considered in executive session and is an enumerated exception under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A, Section C3.
Second.
Councilmember Newsma moves that we move into an executive session. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Councilmember Kelly?
Was this noticed that it would be executive session first for the, I'm just wondering for the public.
Yeah, this is a surprise issue that has arisen that I think we can discuss very briefly, but that needs to be discussed at the top of the agenda.
Okay.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin? Aye. Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakatis?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Wen? Aye. Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries. At 5:49 p.m., the City Council resolves into an executive session to begin immediately in the Councilmember Library. And as I indicated to Councilmember Kelly's very legitimate question, we anticipate this will be very, very quick. We just need to resolve something quickly, and we will return as soon as possible to take on our work for the evening. Good evening. At 6:44 p.m., the City Council meeting is called back to order. The next item on our agenda is my public announcements and proclamations, of which I have one, a proclamation declaring this week Violence Prevention Week and June 3rd Gun Violence Prevention Day. I want to read it in its totality, especially given recent events. Whereas Violence Prevention Week is to honor and remember the many lives in our community that were cut short due to gun and other violence, as well as the survivors of such violence whose lives were forever altered. And whereas 321 people are shot in the United States each day and 111 die as a result of their injuries, sadly 5 of whom are children. And whereas Americans are 25 times more likely to die from gun violence than people in other high-income countries. And whereas on the streets of our own city, at least 9 teens and young adults were shot in 2021, and 4 of them died of their injuries. These shootings are devastating to their loved ones and undermine the sense of safety and community that is fundamental to the well-being of all of our community members. And whereas our own schools, businesses, community centers, and nonprofit organizations have been forced to lock down a number of times due to the threat of violence in our community, causing substantial fear among our children and other community members. And whereas it is clear that Evanston must redouble our efforts to eliminate violence within our city. And whereas in January of 2013, Hadia Pendleton was tragically shot in the city of Chicago. To honor Hadia, a group of her friends inspired a movement to commemorate her life on the first Friday in June by wearing orange, the color that hunters wear to announce themselves to other hunters, and a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas the city of Evanston will honor this legacy and the victims of violence in our community by inviting all to come together, dressed in orange, on Friday, June 3rd in Mason Park between 6 and 9 p.m. to demonstrate our commitment to ending gun violence in our community. Now, therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim the week of May 23rd through 29th, 2022 as Violence Prevention Week, and Friday, June 3rd, 2022 as Gun Violence Prevention Day in the City of Evanston, and encourage all of our local schools and community partners to participate in Violence Prevention Week activities, and strongly encourage all of our community members to commit to preventing violence whenever and wherever they can. As a visible sign of your commitment, please join us for the kickoff of My City, Your City, Our City Safe Summer Initiative in Mason Park on Friday, June 3rd from 6 to 9 p.m. Next item on our agenda is the city manager's public announcements.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Clerk Mendoza, members of City Council, Kelly Gandersky, Interim City Manager. Is Michael Rivera present? Yes, Michael, can you come in, please? And if Sean Cholik is still here. I would like to recognize our fleet management for having won an award and ranked among 100 best in the United States for our fleet. So congratulations, Michael Rivera and Sean Cholik and their team for this wonderful achievement.
Thank you on behalf of the fleet and team. They've left for the afternoon, but thank you for the award.
Next is communications from the city clerk.
I only had one virtual email public comment from Evanston Light TV. If council can read it, it's in your email now.
Thank you. Before we move on, I want to recognize some people who are with us this evening in light of the Violence Prevention Week and Gun Violence Prevention Day proclamation that was just read. First of all, our outreach team is really at the center of doing this important violence prevention work. Did heroic work last summer, for instance, as all of us know. We were already on council then and have remarkable plans in place for this summer as well. And they're here together with the Angel Moms, who have been just providing an extraordinary conscience and moral clarity and support and help in that work and in all of our efforts in the community. And I just wish we could all take a moment to show our appreciation to our whole outreach team and to the Angel Moms in particular. Thank you. This brings us to public comment. This evening, everyone will be given 1 minute and 40 seconds to speak. And I want to begin with those who signed up in person to speak in person, starting with Wendy Pollack.
Good evening. I'm Wendy Pollack. I'm a resident of Ward 4. I simply wanted to speak to I think it's the first item on the agenda, the city manager hiring, and to say I fully support the decision that I hope you'll make tonight or have made to bring on John Fournier. And I think I'll have to learn, is that the right way to say his name? We have so many challenges ahead of us right now, and having a full-time, ongoing city manager with a lot of energy and the breadth and depth of experience that I've seen he has is going to help the talented city staff do what they are capable of doing and really help us tackle some of these challenges. Climate change is among them. It's obviously not the only one. It's one that we were here a month ago talking about. And I've been really, really impressed by what Ann Arbor has been doing on the front of climate change, and hope he'll bring that experience here to Evanston, and hope that we'll be able to welcome him soon. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is John Cleve.
All right, well, thank you all for letting me speak to you. I have a brief comment to make about plans for the Marguerite Inn. And ultimately, what I'm here to implore is to say, there's been a lot of charges toward me personally and towards some of the people I'm with that I'm a NIMBY, I don't want the Marguerite Inn, don't want that diversity brought in, and it's absolutely not the case. We are all in favor of using the Marguerite Inn to serve this. What we're against is having connections run this thing without having any safeguards and controls. And so on Wednesday, there's going to be an attempt by Connections to ultimately use the rooming house designation that they have that will allow them to continue to operate it as a room, as they claim has been a rooming house. And I'm here to say, I realize you guys don't have control over the Land Use Commission, but unique use, it's clearly not a rooming house. Unique use is the right answer for this. And it ultimately is an unprecedented social experiment of taking homeless people, putting them into a hotel, providing all of the wraparound services that they need in order to succeed. You two in particular, I don't understand why you're not out there coercing or compelling connections to file it as a unique use. There's a process in place where we can vet it, we can properly entertain it. Instead, there's a chance that they're going to get the rooming house designation. Your good neighbor agreement has absolutely no effect in that point. It's going to be a toothless piece. So can't you somehow use your influence to create
15 seconds.
As a unique use, so we can craft this thing together and make it a success instead of the failure that it most likely could become. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jerry Garl.
Good evening, Mayor Biss, Interim City Manager Gandersky, City Clerk, and members of Council. I'm Jerry Garl, 8th Ward resident, and I'm here tonight as someone who is deeply concerned about equity, sustainability, and the quality of life for my children and my grandchildren who live here in Evanston. I want to share my views on Evanston's next city manager. First of all, the hiring of the city manager as a non-elected position that nevertheless impacts the lived experience of every Evanston resident is one of City Council's most pivotal and important responsibilities. We elected you to make this decision. I want to welcome Mr. Fournier and express my strong support for his selection as city manager. The position is a very challenging one. The city manager serves not only as the manager of city assets and provider of city services, but really sets the tone for community engagement and is responsible for a very complex and profoundly interconnected set of programs, policies, and rule enforcement that must reflect our values of equity, engagement, community resilience, and safety. I believe that Mr. Fournier's direct hands-on experience in both Pittsburgh and Ann Arbor have prepared him for the challenges that he will face in managing operations for a city like Evanston. Like the other candidate, he has learned from his mistakes.
15 seconds.
While both candidates have admirable and even inspiring philosophies of leadership, only Mr. Fournier has the depth and breadth of direct, relevant experience in making hard decisions, dealing with ambiguity, setting clear priorities, and engaging the community. I strongly support your choice. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Gregory S.
Good evening and happy Monday. I would like to yield my time to our Executive Director, Tyrone Muhammad.
Hello, everyone here, council members. I'm just say, Mayor, I'm kind of disappointed in you. I really am. I thought you was our friend. And I thought you was the friend to black people and black children. It is unacceptable to us. I just can't believe, after dealing with Haven, the middle school, and this noose, the three noose debauchery, it's just unacceptable for me as a black man in this country and a representative of black people in this city that there's not more done. We're not dealing with solution. There's not a fast, immediate resolve. And I'm not seeing no real emotional counseling and behavior modification counseling and things of that nature with our children. If it was a swastika hanging out there, I do not believe this would just get this small attention. The Jews would be running through Evanston talking about, Mayor, what do you have to say about this? And how do we get at it? I'm not accepting it. If it's an LGBTQ threat out there in them trees and some Asian hate, it would be a better response for that community. These are children. She just mentioned climate. We don't even care about kids. We talking about climate. All of this is none and void.
Let me, Jefferson, your time is up.
Okay.
You also signed up yourself. So if you want to start your clock now.
I'm ready to start mine.
All right,
Thank you. I love democracy. It is just unacceptable. We're not leaving this city. We're going to be in front of that school every day. I'm going to pitch a tent until we get some real issues addressed. Because it's not the first time. We was at Niles North when the child got shot. We was called there. We have to deal with this. There has to be a real discussion. It ain't about this time. This is bigger than that. This is bigger than that. I want to hear every one of you all's thoughts on this. I really do. We got a thing on here talking about a weed permit to open another dispensary while black men are still in prison and going to jail every day for weed. She say equity. I want to see it in my lifetime. We have to create it. And I die making sure those children in that school, white and black, don't have to suffer the racism that their parents created. And continue to uphold. I talked to those young folks this morning. Man, them little kids. Every one of them white children are my children. Right. Every one of them black children are my children. Right. How in the world are they suffering through this stuff and we sitting back playing politics with this? Yes, we're not going to accept it. We're bringing out to Chicago out here because it's clear, Mayor. What's this? Let me say
15 seconds.
1800 block of Madison, woman shot in the face. 1 month ago, a man shot. To today in Evanston, a man shot. We got to get at the violence. And I commend our violence prevention brothers and sisters. But, man, we got to do more. I don't hear nothing talking about, forget the gun. They talking about gun. Guns don't shoot. It's the behavior modifications that needed to stop us from picking up guns in the first place. That's what the prevention part is about. That's right. And it's not enough.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Ralph Edwards. Mr. Edwards, do you want to yield your time as well?
I yield my time to Tyrone Muhammad.
Mayor, we got to do better as a city. I hear the citizens even here talking about they're not feeling safe. The long-time citizen, white and black. We got to do more. If our children are expected to go to school and learn why in fear, why having anxiety and grief as a result of someone like in Niles North calling them the N-word, and then actual news being, I don't care who it was directed to. I want you to I want to know the grown people who had enough audacity and galls to put those them nooses on trees where our babies go to learn. Yes. It's unacceptable, and we're not gonna sweep this under the rug like it's nothing. It's something that we could just wax over and then go on to the next issue of the day. None of this means nothing if racism is running rampant in this city.
Talk to him.
We at war, our children's at war. It's clear. We got to be at war. If we talking about permit for dope houses, legal, white men own only, while we still in jail for the same products that land. We built the prison system off of cannabis for 50 years.
15
and you
seconds.
talking reparations. Of what? What that mean? What that mean if you don't have full restoration and repair for the damage caused by the war on drugs? What do that mean? So with that being said, I hope to be able to have a bigger and a better conversation without being rushed through it in a minute time on serious issues. Ain't no such thing as time when we're talking about our children. True. Because guess what? They're going to spend a whole bunch of time and tax dollars and in prison if we get another New York situation where children running through and shooting up our babies. Then you're going to be serious about this. You're not going to brush it over then, because it's going to happen.
Thank
Who
you.
are we? ECCSC. Who are we? ECCSC. Who are we? ECCSC. What are we? Community service.
Thank you.
Community service. say what we do. Say
As-
what? Say love. What? Say love.
Thank you. As always, we now move on to those who signed up online to speak in person, beginning with Javoid Simmons. Is Mr. Simmons here? If not, the next person then is Kamita Terry.
Can I have a time?
Good evening. I'm here today to talk about no cash policies and its discriminatory practice in Evanston. There are more and more businesses that are starting to have policies that do not accept cash. I'll be more than happy to send a copy of my comment and the research that I've done, like I did to my alderperson, who for some odd reason no longer seems to want to respond to me on this issue. But major cities such as New York, D.C., San Francisco, and Philadelphia have created laws that have prohibited stores from going cashless. Many more have legislation pending. The state of New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Colorado have enacted laws banning no cash policies. And again, legislation is pending in other states. The cities and states recognize that eliminating the ability to pay with bills and coins discriminates against those who do not have bank accounts, the underbanked and the unbanked, and they can't get credit, and they don't have a mobile phone or an account for paying with apps. This discrimination mostly affects Black and brown minorities, the elderly, the handicapped, and the homeless. The city of Evanston claims that it is inclusive and shuns discrimination, yet more and more businesses within our borders practice no cash policies. I would like to see the city of Evanston ban this form of discrimination, and will be following up with each of the council people regarding their position on the no cash policy. I'd also like to say that a lot of the founding Black families of Evanston ran from South Carolina because of a major lynching. You can look on Evanston's website, for information about it. My people, the Taggarts, the Gillibos, they ran here because of lynching. Your silence is deafening. Your silence is deafening to the Black community in Evanston. It has been over a week. The silence is deafening. And what it says to us is we are not valuable in this community. You all need to start speaking to us now.
Thank you. The next speaker is Chris Dillow.
Thanks for letting me speak this evening. I would like to address this council in advance of the meeting at the Land Use Committee on Wednesday. I want to strongly condemn the undue influence imposed by the chair of the Land Use Committee last Wednesday on May 11th. He attempted to prejudice the commission by creating an incomplete set of choices. This is in regards to the Margarita Inn and the zoning for rooming house. He claimed that they needed to choose either rooming house or another use, while not stating that they simply could reverse the interpretation. He, even after two of the Land Use Commission said that this is not a rooming house, he continued to tell them that they had to choose either rooming house or another definition, while no other definition applied. The zoning administrator also reinforced that they must choose one or the other without ever stating that they could just choose to reverse it. When two of the Land Use Commission stated that they would just want to reverse it, the chair said, you know that will then lead us to talking about this the entire summer, as if for whatever reason calling the largest homeless shelter on the North Shore a rooming house needed to just happen that night. So additionally, he continued to allow the attorneys with no standing and not having signed up for public comment to come to this and speak to the Land Use Commission, further prejudicing the choice. What we're asking for, what I'm asking for, is to
15
allow
seconds.
the folks on the Land Use Commission to understand what their choices were and to be able to vote again. They're going to be coming up to vote again on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mike Vasilko.
Thank you. Okay, so every month, at least for the last 6-7 months that I can recall, there's been a line item on the bills list for the animal shelter architects and engineering firm. This month it's $31,000, but average it's 30, 40, 25, et cetera. So my question is, why do we keep spending this money? I mean, there are people on the council who want to advance more important agenda items like climate change or like paying down the pension fund, and yet we keep, in my mind, throwing money away because you're not going to be able to afford to build an animal shelter if all these other priorities are a higher priority, which I think they are. So that's a question on that, why we keep spending $30,000, $40,000 a month. Similarly, and I'm not criticizing Connections for the Homeless, but they collect roughly $43,000 a month from council. It's always on the bills list. I think that's pretty much consistent. So that's roughly $500,000 a year. And I notice on tonight's agenda, HC1, another $200,000 is being
15 seconds
proposed for them. So the question is, it seems to be an exclusive arrangement with that organization, and there are other people in the community who offer affordable housing. Tina Payton is here tonight, for instance. She's one who always comes to the council looking for assistance, and she never gets anything. And there are others. Lastly, I just want to say, if I can, I'm upset about the fact that the Finance and Budget Committee chair more or less refuses to resign the chair position, as was said 6 months ago or more than 6 months ago, when that committee was formed. It seems like a real problem, and there should be a new chair of that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tina Payton.
Good evening. I want to cede my time to Tina, if it's okay.
Good evening. My name is Tina Payton, and I have stage 4 breast cancer. This radiation mask was one of the scariest moments of my life. The second scariest moment was when there was shots fired at my family's rental property. In September 2021, a Connections for the Homeless participant living in the building shot a bullet through the floor and barely missing another tenant and her children. 10 days later, the same Connections client's vehicle was removed from the premises for a homicide investigation. After learning these situations, I immediately evacuated the tenants for the safety of the other tenants. In November 2021, I met with the mayor, Councilmember Kelly, Connections director, and executive director, and the police to discuss these tragedies. I was assured that this family and the second family, Connections family, would be relocated at the end of 2021. At the same meeting, I was told by the mayor that I would be compensated for the lost income of having to evacuate my other tenants for their safety. To date, the mayor has ignored me, the city manager has not followed up, and the aldermen of the 5th Ward and Connections for the Homeless are making excuses why there is no action on this matter. One of the Connections participants still resides in the building and has threatened me bodily harm and defamed me. Tonight, Connections is asking for money for their programs, while I sit here waiting for them to and the city of Evanston to fulfill their promise. You should ask Connections. Will they put more participants like this in the other landlords' buildings? Will they continue to support the behavior from their clients? Will they continue not to support me, who has been supported to them and homeless for over 50 years? I ask you to table this matter until the Connections for the Homeless and the City of Evanston make me whole again, so I don't have to feel like this. And a special thank you to Councilmember Kelly and Councilmember Vervelle for supporting me, because you will not.
Thank you. This brings us to those who are participating in public comment remotely this evening, beginning with Jonah Karsh, who will be followed by Betty Esther and then Mary Rosinski.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Jonah Karsh. It's my first time speaking in public comment, but I'm a third ward resident, and I wanted to speak out about the city manager appointment tonight, which I think is a really consequential vote for the city of Evanston. You may be aware, but there's some reporting that when Mr. Fournier, who I think it seems very competent, when it was the head of HR in Ann Arbor, he administered a background check to potential employees, which I've emailed to every member of the council. Some of the questions on that background check said, have you ever been accused of stealing anything from any employer, whether you did it or not? Have you ever had purchased goods repossessed? Have you ever had the police called to your home, or has anyone ever called the police on you? Have you ever been stopped by law enforcement while driving where you did not receive a citation? Have you ever purchased or consumed any alcoholic beverages when you were under 21 years of age? And have you ever remained at a public or private gathering where illegal drugs were being used? These are very problematic questions, clearly. It's also reporting indicates that Mr. Fournier did not create this background check and that he filled it out when he was hired, so it's not his creation. But I think it says something about potential blind spots to equity, which residents have repeatedly expressed as the most important issue for our next city manager, that he has that he continued to administer this survey in spite of those questions and didn't stop administering it until there was a complaint from an employee who almost decided not to accept the job position because of that. So I just want to say to the council, it seems like the votes are there to confirm Mr. Fournier, but I would hope that council members that vote for him explain how they view these HR complaints and what your approach is to making sure that he doesn't move us backwards on equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Betty Esther, who will be followed by Mary Rosinski and then Elliot Zashin.
Good evening. And well, to the new city manager, we will welcome you and see how you perform. We will be watching closely through the word transparent. That is a word that has been bandied about in this city with no concrete, legitimate effort shown in transparency. We talk about affordable housing. We talk about the homelessness. In the Fifth Ward, I see more houses going up costing over $1 million. Now, where does that help in terms of affordable housing? Where does that help in terms of keeping the residents here that are here? We don't look at, and we have to look at property being built, property being sold at a high rate. That one thing is affected, and that is our property tax. We do not take into account how our property tax is put together, and we talk about the budget that is supposed to be balanced, and
time.
I was kind of amazed with that to see that there was another 11 million added to the budget from when it was approved. So how can it be balanced? We need to look
Thank you.
at what the Cook County will be adding, saying this is the taxes we will have to pay. We need to be more transparent with our property tax that we are laying on people. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mary Rosinski, who will be followed by Elliot. Just one second, Ms. Rosinski. You'll be followed by Elliot Zation and then Doreen Price. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Mary Rosinski, and I'm speaking to the city manager position. I was disappointed that the process of the selection of the city manager lacks sufficient public involvement or transparency, especially in light that this is not an elected position, yet is arguably the most important position in Evanston, as it sets the tone for the culture of the city and also as a steward of our monies, and presenting the facts to you, the council, and works with the staff. I will welcome Mr. Fournier if he is chosen as the next manager, and hope that he expect that the promises he made during the town hall stakeholder interview will be kept, and in particular, his commitment to racial equity and the steps he outlined implementing it across all departments. Mr. Fournier and Mayor Biss and City Council, I hope you will immediately begin taking steps to make racial equity a true priority rather than use it as a political buzzword in Evanston. Today's Evanston requires intelligent, compassionate, and scrupulously honest lead staff member who is committed to dismantling all the policies, programs, and practices that have embedded favoritism based on class, race, and neighborhood. And that comes from Leslie Williams, who couldn't make it here tonight. One of the first steps I hope that Fournier will take will be to announce his plan to build on the Equity Commission for developing racial equity toolkit for every department.
15
and
seconds.
Okay, I'll skip this summit because I think other people will speak to it. I also would expect that Mr. Fournier, and I hope that he will be a steward of Evanston's tax dollars and not squander them on unnecessary consultants and expensive yet low quality projects, which, like Michael Basickle had said, requires ongoing repairs, like with the Robert Crown, like the Fountain Square. We cannot afford those kind of decisions being made in our city anymore. Thank you very much. We need financial accountability and transparency. Bye.
Thank you. The next speaker is Elliot Zation, who will be followed by Doreen Price and then Carl Klein.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. It's apparent that you've made a decision to hire Mr. Fournier as our next city manager. To those of us who had hoped for a more transparent and participatory search process, this has been a major disappointment. Members of the CABG and Reclaim Evanston and other organizations last Friday indicated their dissatisfactions with the process. But that's behind us now. We've learned indirectly there were aspects of Mr. Fournier's work at his previous places of employment that raised questions about his commitment to racial equity in the hiring and management of municipal staff. We have heard that members of the council were aware of these issues and discussed them with Mr. Fournier, and they were satisfied that these issues did not disqualify him from consideration. It would have been reassuring had members of the public had some account of this interaction with Mr. Fournier. At this point, what I and my colleagues want to express is our belief that Mr. Fournier comes to Evanston with, to put it crudely, baggage. We need assurances that the mayor and the council will set clear expectations for the new city manager, particularly in the area of racial equity with respect to staff. CABG has made a number of specific proposals in this regard, and they are being shared with you tonight. We will be watching Mr. Fournier to see how he conducts himself in office, and we will raise questions and issues if we believe he is not meeting the proposed expectations. If the mayor and council hope to restore public confidence in the city's selection processes, setting these expectations now before the formal hiring is a definite necessity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Doreen Price, who will be followed by Carl Klein and then Gail Schechter. Is Ms. Price in the Zoom, Luke? Ms. Price, can you hear us? Well, we'll give her a minute to work on her technical issues and come back to her. Let's move on then to Carl Klein.
Good evening. I am speaking as a resident of the 3rd Ward. Tonight, one of the most consequential votes will take place. After receiving the results from the city manager candidate survey on Friday and taking some time to review them, I discovered a majority of the wards favored Snapper Poche, meaning 5 wards gave Snapper higher ratings. So after reviewing the results from the survey, it is clear that there is no community mandate in favor of Mr. Fournier. Finally, as a resident of the 3rd Ward, I am now going to address the 3rd Ward specifically. Councilmember Melissa Wynn, please take this into account when you cast your vote tonight. A majority, 50% or more, of people in your ward favored Snapper Poche in all 4 areas. 50% believe Snapper Poche is most able to bring together diverse perspectives towards a common goal. 53.13% believe Snapper Poche is most able to devise innovative strategies to efficiently and equitably deliver municipal services. 50% believe Snapper Poche is most able to hold himself and others accountable with transparency and integrity. 50.13% believe Snapper Poche is most able to communicate effectively with different audiences. For John Fournier, the areas were more varied in ratings. 40% or less rated John
15
Fournier
seconds.
as most able to perform these tasks. I was unable to tell all of my public comment, and now I will email you my full public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Gail Schechter.
Thank you. I'm speaking as a member of the leadership team of Community Alliance for Better Government. You, Mr. Mayor, and members of the City Council have a chance to go against the grain of the country. Charles Blow's editorial, The Great Erasure, in yesterday's New York Times, despairs over the power brokers' erasure of any sense of urgency in realizing a racial reckoning 2 years after George Floyd's murder. In my life, and I quote from Mr. Blow, I have arrived at the conclusion that real liberation, equity, safety, and the pursuit of happiness is not rooted in feelings and personal evolutions, only a change in the parameters of power, political, economic, and cultural, who has it and who gets to exercise it, who is benefited by it and who is harmed by it can transform this country, unquote. I'm concerned that you're backtracking and picking Mr. Fournier, someone with a tarnished record when it comes to racial equity and government transparency, especially after the lifeguard cover-up. Evanston needs a city manager with an unblemished record of integrity. Mayor Biss said in his address last week that Evanston should not have to, quote, choose between safety and racial justice, unquote. But I fear that is the false choice you are making tonight in selecting Mr. Fournier. You can put your vision and values into action, hire Mr. Poche or start again. That is what we expect. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's go back to Doreen Price. Ms. Price, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. The speakers ahead of me were profoundly and movingly so in favor of a change that's so important for us as a city, considering that we've not had that kind of freedom of speech and participation since Wally Berkowitz, which is a long time ago. And to forget that and to say that someone who doesn't reflect what Mr. Pouchet is about is really missing an opportunity, which will come back to haunt us, if not in legal suits and other things, not by me, but other people for sure. I can't afford legal suits. So in terms of affordability, it has to do too with regard to inequality. We have a major, and I'm sure Melissa Wynn understands this, we have a major discrepancy, and also Eleanor, between the rich and the poor, and that inequality has gotten larger, and that also relates to hate And when privilege is married to hate, we have white supremacy. And that's what we saw, and that's what the mayor spoke out against. There can't be a better support of what you said, Mr. Mayor, about no place for hate. And we can't have artificial consensus. We must reflect the will of the people as exemplified by the numbers read to you by the other speaker just ahead of me. And with regard to Gail said, with regard to not settling for nothing short of what we absolutely need considering our history. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our public comment for the evening and brings us to special orders of business. Would anyone care to take a motion regarding item SP1?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move item SP1, which is Resolution 37-R-22, authorizing the appointment of John Fournier as City Manager for the City of Evanston.
Second. Councilmember Nusma moves passage of Resolution 37-R-22. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am enthusiastically supportive of John Fournier as our next city manager. Given his wealth of knowledge, his experience, and his demonstrated willingness to engage in the community. One of the threads through this process has been transparency and community engagement. And one of the things we learned throughout this process is that on the scale of communities hiring city managers that have public engagement to zero public engagement to all the public engagement, is that Evanston is on kind of the extreme end of the scale for public engagement. And for that reason, we weeded some candidates out of the process, or some candidates who may otherwise have been worth considering chose not to apply. But Mr. Fournier, to his credit, said he would not be willing to work in a community that did not have public engagement as part of the process. So I am happy that he is here. I believe his values align with our community. He has demonstrated throughout this process that he comes with a wealth of knowledge, with a depth of preparation, and an acknowledgement of his own weaknesses and willingness to address them. And so I'm glad that I have the support of the Fourth Ward, who fairly clearly expressed their preference for Mr. Fournier in this role. And I would just urge folks throughout Evanston to please do your best to welcome Mr. Fournier to our town. Let's show him the best of Evanston. Give him the benefit of the doubt, as we would give anybody assuming this role the benefit of the doubt. And let's look for ways to make this successful, because Mr. Fournier's success is going to be our success. And I will be enthusiastically supporting Mr. Fournier's contract this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councilmember Revelle, who will be followed by Heracles.
Well, I would like to explain why I, too, am going to be voting for John Fournier as our next city manager. For me, in seeking a city manager, I was really looking for someone with the experience that demonstrated the ability to manage a city like Evanston with a $360 million budget, 800 employees. It's really it's a more complex organization, and I was really looking for someone who had demonstrated hands-on experience in that regard. Certainly, being a city administrator in Ann Arbor, or I guess assistant city manager. Let me take this off. Assistant city manager in Ann Arbor obviously provided that kind of hands-on experience with a large staff, and so I think that's going to be standing us in good stead. the experience that, excuse me, Mr. Fournier had in Pittsburgh, I think was also really remarkable. He played a significant role in enabling that city to get out of state receivership 3 years early. So he has a really strong background in budget and finance issues, and heaven only knows we are challenged every year to come up with a budget that's going to allow us to fund the many wonderful programs and initiatives that that are our priorities, and yet we want to do that without further burdening our residents. So I'm looking forward to the ideas that Mr. Fournier is going to bring to us from his previous engagements. He's experienced with labor negotiations, which is also a critical issue for Evanston. And a bonus for me is really his experience in implementing Ann Arbor's Climate Action Plan, which is equally ambitious as Evanston's. And I think he's got some really excellent ideas about places to look for new sources of funding, new strategies to employ to advance our carbon goals, our climate action goals. I would just like to mention a few quotes that references made about him, because I think people wonder what is he going to be like in terms of interacting with members of our community. So some of the words that people came up with, they said he was flexible, especially skilled at conflict resolution, calm nature, calming influence during the pandemic. He listened to constituents and made them feel heard. I really do believe he's going to be really helpful in the community engagement that is going to be obviously something that our community is really looking forward to. So I'm really looking forward to voting yes for Mr. Fournier.
Councilmember Herakaris.
So, hello, John. See him sitting in the back there. So, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the interview process, and one of the things that John really brought forward and was his enthusiasm for cities and the way the cities run. I think one of the first things he said to us was, "I love cities," and you could tell by just his enthusiasm and over the course of our interview process. There were many times when John would mention certain policies, and I'd be like, "Yes, that I want to do that. I want to help do that." And so, I really feel that I'm personally excited. I have lots of notes with different policy things that I see, and I'm like, "Yes." As soon as John shows up here, I'm going to see like, what can I do to help us do this? And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also excited to appoint John. I think just the fact that he is here in the audience today says a lot about who he is. And going through the interview process and asking very difficult questions, it was clear to me that he was the most experienced out of the many candidates that we interviewed. In addition to that, as I reflected on the notes, and I'm just going to remove my mask so I'm not muffled, and I see my other two council members have theirs. In addition to the experience that I just mentioned, his operational experience in terms of the complexity of what we do on a daily basis, he was definitely not only prepared, but brought a lot of insight and innovation in the very short period that we had to interview him. The other thing that was very high on the list from our residents in the second ward is someone with budget experience. And again, throughout the process, it was clear to me that John not only read through our budget, but also has a deep understanding of how municipal budgets are supposed to be run. And I was also incredibly impressed by that. Within the budget, there are important, nuances in terms of how we monitor our federal grants. As mentioned by Councilmember Ravel, he also has extensive experience with union and labor negotiations, what I think is very critical to our operations. The other part that I found very impressive about John is his experience working with our town gown issues. He has experience with has a great deal of experience in working with college towns, and I think that's very vital. And the other piece that was a little bit of a twist this year, we typically have our directors weigh in, which I think has been something that we've done in the past, and it was recommended with this new council that we also go a level deeper into our staff, which are our managers. And I don't know if the members of the public know this, but in both directors and our managers, in their detailed feedback, both groups were very in favor of John, which I think says a lot in terms of his ability to impress our staff that he would be responsible for leading. So if I could summarize, I think, John, that you have the passion, the professionalism, and also the capacity to lead our organization to the next level. Our employee stats in many different industries is low. Our police census is low. And I think that you bring the experience and fortitude that we need, quite honest, to keep things going. Kelly, I definitely want to give you a shout out in terms of stepping in at the right time to providing stability. And I think the two of you working together to move our staff forward is exactly what our town needs at this time. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Kelly, followed by Wynn.
Thank you. So, although, I do feel that Mr. Fournier has a solid understanding of municipalities, I share concerns that we've heard from much of our community, concerns around equity and other concerns that have been expressed not only this evening but throughout. And furthermore, my ward, the first ward, came out in a clear majority supporting Snapper Posh, as well. More wards in the city came out supporting the other candidate. I'm concerned that that the background that we've all been able to see does not represent or will lead us in the kind of change that the community would like to see. I cannot support this contract for John Fournier. Thank you.
Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think many good things, positive things have been said about Mr. Fournier. So I want to briefly summarize what my reasoning is. Some of it will echo my colleagues. First and foremost, Mr. Fournier comes from a city manager form of government. That's what we are. That's what we've been for over 70 years. That's what we need here in Evanston. A chief executive officer who understands that role. And the fact, as Councilmember Braithwaite pointed out, our staff unanimously selected him and thought that that was an appropriate leader is really important. And these following items are not in any particular order, but are all critically important. Experience in finance and budget. Evanston is always challenged from a finance and budget standpoint. Right now, where we are in the pandemic, we are even more so because we're not sure where we are in the pandemic. The fact that you were in Pittsburgh when it was actually controlled state managed, and brought it out of the state management 3 years early, really is significant. I think it demonstrates your understanding of finance and budget and from a city standpoint. Over and over again, you presented us with data-driven solutions to a wide variety of problems, particularly climate action-related problems, which I took note of in my notes many times. That is something that's critically important here in Evanston. The innovation that you talked about in Ann Arbor. All of the innovations that you brought about, I thought were really, really interesting. That's something that's been a hallmark here in Evanston for quite a while. We're a city that innovates, and we need to continue doing that. The fact that both in Pittsburgh and in Ann Arbor, you had deep experience dealing with powerful universities with world-class reputations. That's us, and that has been Evanston since its founding. And having that experience is really important as well. We need to partner more with Northwestern and bash heads with them less. Your commitment to transparency, your willingness to work with the council and all of our various permutations and moods, I think is critically important. And I welcome you, I'm very happy to support you, and I welcome you and your family to Evanston. Thank you.
Seeing no further, Councilmember Reed.
Hello, Mr. Fournier and community. I also want to welcome you. I didn't know that your wife was here, so I didn't get a chance to say hello, so hello. I will join my colleagues in saying that I think you are an extremely, extremely impressive candidate for city manager. And just as was shared by my neighbor, both in here and in the 9th Ward, next door to the 8th Ward, there were many things that I heard while you were presenting to us, from parking to all kinds of nerdy stuff. And when you said you were passionate about cities, my bells started ringing. But I will say I have some major concerns. And when I look at that 77 questionnaire, and I see that you oversaw that department for 2 years, and I read, Tom Guajardo's letter when he applied for the job, I have major, major concerns. And I'm not going to get it. I mean, some of the questions were listed. I'm not going to, make it a big a scene, but very concerning stuff there. And it leads me to question your judgment when it comes to racial equity issues. It leads me to wonder if you are able to identify issues that deal with equity and effectively advocate for them. I wish, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why this would happen. I didn't have an opportunity to speak with you, and I didn't want to catch you out in the hallway and try to have a weird conversation before the vote. I really wish you had floated it to us. I wish you would explain that, especially when one of our interview questions was, where have you made a mistake? And you did not give that as an answer as to where you made a mistake. And that's even more concerning. But what I'm happy about is some of my colleagues, like Councilmember Byrne, who very adamantly ensured that in this contract we're going to have racial equity training. I'm a firm believer in second chances. People mess up. I've messed up in my life. All kinds of people have messed up. Hopefully we learn from it. I haven't yet seen that you've learned from the mistake, and I'm wanting to see that. And I'm hoping that you will prove to us that you have learned from that mistake. And that's why I'm saying this here now publicly if you haven't learned, please learn. And we can I think you're going to do a fine job here. You have the votes. I think you're going to do a fine job here. And more so than just believing in you as one person, because no city is transformed by one person, I believe in our community. And I believe that our community will hold us and hold you accountable to the change that we need to see. And so with that, I wish you the best of luck. I know that you're going to do a phenomenal job in many areas, and in the areas that you may be weaker, we are here to support you. You will be our new city manager, and so we have to make the best of that. And I think not just make the best of it, because again, I really do. A lot of things you were talking about, really excited. But just those concerns are weigh on me. So thank you.
Councilmember Burns.
Because Councilmember Reed mentioned the the training and education in the contract, I'll just quickly read the portion of it because I know everyone won't have the time to review it. And just the abbreviated version, employees shall attend such training seminars relevant to his duties as city manager, including training on diversity, equity, and inclusion as determined by the city council in consultation with the employee annually. And that was something that John language that John happily accepted, and we appreciate that. I do want to start off there on the question about equity. I am someone who shared concerns about the investigation and what came out of it. I looked into it, stayed up till pretty early in the morning one night, digging into it, going as deep as I could go through reading the articles in the independent investigation, which, of course, if you don't know, the independent investigation cleared John of all the complaints against him. And I want to hold there real quick. That's important because there's someone on council right now, and some may not agree with this, but that we're accused of things that I know from being the person that was with him in the office that he did not do. There are people that have been critical of John and the investigation that I know, former employees of the city of Evanston that were accused of things they said they didn't do, right? And so we all know people are wrongfully accused all the time. And so in order to be objective, which I think is what I was elected to do, I really need to see an independent investigation and try to get all the information in front of me so I can make a sound decision for the city. And what I came up with is I would not be voting for John if I felt like he discriminated against someone because of race or any other reason. In fact, the application process that the HR applicant at the time went through and objected against, John also went through. And so what I've chalked it up to is one, this was a time when John was both the acting assistant city administrator as well as the interim HR director, two really big important tasks with a lot of responsibilities. And unfortunately, I think this particular issue got away from him, and that's deeply concerning to me, which is why I wanted to make sure that this language was in the contract. But that being said, I don't think he did it. I know he did not do anything illegal based on the evidence that I saw. I think there's a reason why he was cleared of any wrongdoing, any illegal wrongdoing, and again, he's welcomed the opportunity to take this training, and I'm sure whether it's today or at another point, he'll speak for himself as to what happened in that situation. Putting that aside for a moment, I also, though, want to point out the fact that I appreciated his answers around equity. He was the candidate that really said you need an equity commission, which we have. He was the candidate who expressed the fact that we need an equity commissioner, which that we used to have one. The position is now vacant, and we need to fill it. But as the legislator, we've done our job, right? We've allocated the funds in the budget. The position is there to be filled, and obviously we expect John to fill the position. He talked about the need for an equity lens. And to me, these are, even though people criticize him for within the best of his ability, explaining what he felt equity meant and how from a structural standpoint you go about achieving it. I think that's what you should do, because that's his job as a city manager, right? It's to make sure that we have the pieces in place to achieve the outcome that we want as council, but also the community wants. And so I appreciate those very detailed answers. And that was really what John represented to me. He was much more detailed than the other guy, although I started off in support of the other person. Every opportunity that we had to see him, he was detailed, he was prepared, he was organized, and he had really good ideas on how to move this city forward. And I want to make this very clear. To me, equity is about outcomes. I have residents who are calling me on a consistent basis saying that they are on the cusp of leaving Evanston because they can't afford it. We have issues related to violence and other issues. We need somebody that can come in and is ready to take action, because it is results ultimately, I believe, is what Fifth Ward residents want, and not more rhetoric, not more unnecessary planning, although we've planned and the verdict is out. We know what we need to do, and now it's time to execute. And out of both candidates, I think John is a candidate that's ready to come in and execute and get results for the city. And then lastly, I just want to say that, point out a few things that I appreciated. He was one of the first public officials that I've really ever heard say, whatever you're doing in community engagement, you should double it, right? So those who are concerned on whether or not on his commitment to public engagement, he said you need to double it. He spoke brilliantly and profoundly about the challenges that governments face, having a lack of trust, from the public. And his response to that was to double community engagement, right? That is the type of responsive leadership that I think we all want. And again, I'm happy to vote for John, and good luck. I think he's going to prove that he was the person for the job. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion.
I just wanted to say one more thing.
So since no one who's not yet spoken is requesting to speak, we'll go to folks requesting a second time. Councilmember Reed, you have 1:20 left.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing because I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. I've said my piece to John. But Interim Manager Gandersky, I just want to, this voting on this contract also ends another contract. And so I want to say thank you for your service. In their interim position, you were thrust into the position during a time that was where everything was in there. A new council, new mayor, a newly appointed city manager that was just leaving. So a lot of stuff going on. Police chief leaving, and you. And I say this with the utmost respect, but you exceeded my expectations, and you really, you exceeded my expectations, and you asked me to support John, even with my concerns with John, and I think because of that, I'm going to support the contract because you exceeded my expectations, and I'm hoping John too will. So thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Kelly.
Councilmember Kelly with 4:10 left.
Just a short comment. So I think everybody on council has agreed to include the part about the DEI training, which I think is significant. But I want to say that DEI is only as strong as it is as there's an accountability to it. So I just want to make sure we have that in place. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, seeing no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll on Resolution 37-R-22?
Councilmember Suffredin?
Yes.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Herackaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Mayor Biss?
I vote aye. And with that, with 9 members voting in favor and 1 voting against, item SP1 is declared passed. Thank you. I don't usually say much up here, but I think this is a really important moment, and so I'm going to exert my privilege as chair and just say a few quick remarks. First of all, before we get anywhere, I want to echo what was said by a few folks about Kelly. Kelly was put in a ridiculous position and handled it with a lot of grace, and it's been longer than she initially signed up for, and I think more difficult than any of us expected. And I do think we owe her a real thank you for her success in leading us through this time. Thank you very much, Kelly. I want to just quickly offer appreciation to the way in which this search was done and all the people who helped. There was a lot of public input, which was really helpful. I fear there might be some cynicism out there, but I don't think it's revealing too much about our executive sessions to say we talk a lot about the input we get from the public. It really weighs heavily on our thinking about these issues. Our staff, as was indicated, put very, very meticulous thought into very detailed and careful evaluations, which again we took very seriously, weighed meaningfully in the process, and a variety of community leaders really stepped up and weighed in as well. I think one of the indications that it was a successful search is that we had two really impressive finalists. By the way, I want to show appreciation to the search firm Stanton Chase. I think they did their job and more in producing for us a search that generated two extremely qualified and impressive finalists. The search got difficult because those two really impressive, highly qualified people were really different. So it wasn't a question of comparing two kind of very similar options. Maybe on average people liked them equally almost, but their strengths were really, really different. And in that situation, if you're looking for candidate A's strengths, then you might say, well, gosh, candidate B is so much weaker in that area. Why would anyone feel that way? And vice versa. And so people had really, really strong feelings, which again was important and appreciated and beneficial, but created some tension in the latter days of the search. I want to cut this short. I don't want to belabor things, but I think that John, from literally the first minute that he walked in to interview in the first round in room 2402, was just very, very, very clearly knowledgeable and precise and organized in his mind. And I think that all of us up here have so much that we want to do, that we have clarity about where we want to go, but we haven't necessarily always been successful in shaping the organization to go that way. And I think ultimately that level of knowledge and clarity and experience and specificity about how to get from point A to point B was just something that this council was simply not prepared to walk away from. And I want to dwell on that for a second, because I think that because one of the enormous differences between these two candidates was just how kind of traditional their bio was for this kind of a job, right? Like ranging from like, hey, the number two in a similar but larger community, couldn't get more textbook than that, to a guy with a really different and an eclectic background. I think because those two bios were on offer, there were some who felt like, well, we've got sort of the normal candidate and the unusual candidate, so that means we've got the status quo candidate and the non-status quo candidate. And that, I want to say in the strongest possible terms, is not true. I don't have the impression, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I don't have the impression that John was interested in applying for a job where he would be a status quo candidate based on his visible enthusiasm when talking about innovative ideas to do things differently in all the different municipalities he's worked in. I don't think he's interested in being a status quo candidate or a status quo city manager anywhere. But also, none of us are interested in that either. We had an election a year ago that brought in not only a new mayor who ran on a platform of a lot of change and a new city clerk, but also 4 new city council members. And since then, we've found another new city council member. This is a change moment for our city. And if John's time as city manager is not a time of change, that will mean that he has not succeeded, but it will also mean that we have not succeeded. And perhaps most importantly, it will mean that democracy has not succeeded, because the democratic message from the election that occurred is that change must happen. And so that is the task that is awaiting us, is how to effectuate the change that the community is demanding, that the elected officials promised, and that our team here is excited to deliver in a way that is orderly and effective and durable and will really, really work. And ultimately, this council concluded that this was the candidate to effectuate those changes, again, because of his experience, because of his knowledge, and because of the specificity with which he was able to answer questions about that. And so I am excited for us to work together. I'm excited to starting right now participate in the process of introducing you to the many, many different people and constituencies across this community who are going to be partners in this work. I want to read a sentence that the City Council agreed on. The onboarding of the new city manager will be overseen by City Council and led on a day-to-day basis by the mayor in close collaboration with all elected officials and with support from city staff. We are all here together to do that work of introducing you to all of the different constituencies inside this city government and across this community who are going to be rooting for you to succeed and who know that we're all going to succeed together or we'll all fail separately. So thank you for your enthusiasm for this job. Welcome to Evanston. And I think it'd be appropriate at this moment to ask our incoming city manager to come to the podium and address the council and the community.
Wow, what an evening so far. Thank you all so much. You know, I want to express my very, very sincere appreciation and gratitude for this appointment. And I come to you humbly with a lot of hope and a lot of ambition to work with each of you to make sure that this city council is successful, that each of you are able to find success in this city and achieve your successes, to work with a tremendously talented staff who I was very impressed by, and also to work directly with the community. This is a democracy. This is a big D democracy. It's important for us to be engaging the voices of community in the work that happens in this city hall. I just want to express my sincere appreciation once again. And I just want to say, you know, I also have to commend Stanton Chase, the firm that did the work, because a lot of people don't know what a passive search is, but it's when you look for candidates who aren't necessarily looking for another job and you try to pitch them on the great opportunity that they're trying to help hire for. And when I learned about the city's commitment to really ambitious progressive change, to tackling the climate crisis, the serious work that needs to happen with the budget, the urgent work that needs to be prioritized for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I am extremely serious about. I have been throughout my career. It really became apparent to me that this was a very special opportunity. And my wife, Dr. Chelsea Wentworth, is here. Early in the process, before anything became public, we came to Evanston. It was really important for us to come here and walk through your neighborhoods and enjoy your parks and stroll through the business districts and grab a coffee and go to a restaurant and of course see Lake Michigan and visualize ourselves in a community where we could see us succeeding and see us bringing our daughter and having our family here. And Evanston is absolutely that community. So I want to thank you again. And I just look forward to July 18th, hitting the ground running and working with all of you and the staff and the community to achieve your very ambitious goals. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And welcome, Chelsea. I apologize. Welcome, Dr. Wentworth. I'm very bad at titles. Just call me Daniel. This brings us to our consent agenda. Is there any item that members would like to see pulled off the consent agenda?
A12, please.
So I've heard A9 and A12.
F1
F1
and HC1.
A10, please.
So I have A9, A10, A12, HC1, and F1.
And F2.
Well, yeah, F2 is for discussion anyhow, so that seems like a good thing. But good point. So anything else? A9, A10, A12, HC1, F1, F2? Going once? Going twice? All right, in that case, I would entertain a motion. Oh. Yep, A6. Whoa. Councilmember Nusma?
That was a mistake, sorry.
Oh.
How did that even happen?
I move the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves the consent agenda except for A6, A9, A10, A12, HC1, F1, F2. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes, and the consent agenda, except for the 7 items previously named, passes. Councilmember Reed, would you like to make a motion on item A6?
Yes, I move item A6, Resolution 34R22, authorizing the interim city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Evanston and the Board of Education of Evanston, Skokie, School District Number 65.
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves item A6. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
On this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and so item A6 is passed. Councilmember,
I move item A9, Ordinance 48022, amending Title VII, Chapter 12 of the City Code concerning failure to pay delinquent charges.
is there a second? The motion fails for lack of a second. Councilmember Reed, do you want to make a motion on item A10?
I move ordinance 49022, excluding cannabinoids, the presence of cannabinoids in the city's pre-employment drug screening program for employment criteria.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves item A10. Councilmember Byrne seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't. Councilmember Burns?
Sorry. Yeah, just from, I don't know if it's Council Cummins is there?
I am.
Yes, he's here.
Could you explain what we'd be voting on?
This is an, good evening, members of City Council, Interim City Manager Kanderski, Clerk Mendoza, Nicholas Cummings, Corporation Council. This is an ordinance. This item was referred by Councilmember Burns, and our office drafted an ordinance that's similar to the employment criteria set forth by the Civil Service Commission, establishes a rule in the city of Evanston that city employees would not be screened for cannabinoids in a pre-employment screening. It would be actually part of the city code.
Okay, thank you. So we discussed this a little bit in APW, but just wanted to see if, I mean, this has been a somewhat of a not controversial, but a contentious discussion behind the scenes. So I wanted to see if there were if anybody had any questions or concerns that they were willing to speak publicly about.
All right, thank you for that offer. We have a few lights that are on. The first speaker is Councilmember Hedakaris, followed by Braithwaite.
I'm in support of this. In case anyone hasn't noticed, marijuana is legal in Illinois, and we shouldn't be denying employment for people who partake.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess for Nick, I do have a couple of questions. I agree that marijuana is legal now. I think there have always been two particular groups of employees, those that operate large vehicles, and I don't know how the CDL license makes provisions for those who use marijuana also based on the time that it stays in their system and what type of liability that would expose us to as well for our first responders, police and fire. What are the Illinois state laws as it relates to their use of the substance while on or off duty?
So those that require a commercial driver's license, they're regulated by the Federal Transportation Commission, and as a result, they essentially cannot use, according to the Omnibus Transportation Employee Testing Act. They would not. There's not an exception allowed for them. Currently, the city policy and Human Resources Department Manager Megan Fallara is present, is to test employees. And this is something I worked with the previous Human Resources Manager when I was the Deputy City Attorney. We test pre-employment screening for those who are in safety-sensitive positions in terms of automatic determination of employment. Although all employees have been tested pre-screening, those that are not in safety-sensitive positions are evaluated on a case-by-case basis in terms of whether they are employed. We've actually had this tested in my time as deputy and as corporation counsel, where there have been employees that have tested positive. There's a conversation, evaluation of the position, an offer is made or not based upon the position. Insofar as our public safety, there is state law that requires the police essentially have to bargain for that. So any testing process for our police department as part of their union contract, which we do have a testing procedure in place for our public safety folks. There is some expectation, especially with our current staffing levels. You might have experienced callbacks. And so that is a conversation I've had behind the scenes with Councilmember Burns. If you have officers, they're off duty, you think they're off duty, somebody calls in sick, they might have to get called back. There is an expectation that you cannot show we are required, because we receive federal funds, to have a drug-free workplace policy, which we do have. So if someone shows up to work impaired, whether it be alcohol or drugs, they are subject to a reasonable suspicion test. We can send them for testing immediately on the spot. So it is important that we train our supervisors and managers, and there is a commitment from Human Resources to do that, to make sure we actually spot folks and we're not targeting people. But we have all of these things in place, and I think the main concern with this referral and with the ordinance is pre-employment screening. The reality is we do not employ the screening that the Illinois State Police does, for example, for DUI. It's a urine sample that essentially just checks the presence, not the levels. So that's what this ordinance is to address.
Thank you.
I think the city manager wanted to add something to that.
So I just wanted to make a distinction on a couple of different levels, and Corporation Counsel Cummings touched on it. We have to distinguish between safety-sensitive positions and non-safety sensitive. And when Nick was explaining that on a case-by-case basis, we have made some exceptions, we make those exceptions for non-safety sensitive positions. So for instance, administrative office workers who test positive with our pre-employment drug screening, we take those on a case-by-case basis because they are not operating heavy equipment or in a position where they themselves could get hurt or hurt someone else by virtue of their position if they were to be impaired. The city of Chicago also implements a very similar drug screening policy, and they test all union employees, and then they make exceptions on a case-by-case basis for non-safety sensitive positions. So what we're doing is already pretty consistent with what other local governments are doing, but also I wanted to really make the council aware, if we haven't already, I know I've preached this a little bit, we have completely revamped our handbook, and we had a law firm look at it. Megan has looked at it. She's having her team look at it. We're in the process of completing it, and I think you're going to see some changes that reflect more modern times and better best practices. So I just wanted to make sure I made that distinction for the council as well.
Thank you. No one who has not yet spoken is requesting to speak, so we'll go back to Councilmember Burns, who has 4 minutes and 25 seconds left.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a few things. One, this would not change anything in terms of our ability to test if there is reasonable suspicion. So if someone is, behaving out of the ordinary, or it seems as though they seems that they are, creating a disturbance or creating a unsafe environment because of whatever issue, whether it be a substance or something else. So this wouldn't stop us from being able to do that. Again, simply from denying people employment merely for doing something that is legal during non-work hours. That's essentially what this would change. We would no longer be denying people employment for doing something that is legal during non-work hours. And we would not be changing anything that would conflict with state law or federal law. As Council Cummings expressed, the federal government requires that anyone who is employed to a job that requires a CDL has to be tested for these cannabinoids during the pre-employment drug screening, and that will continue. Again, the concern is that this is a real issue. I'll offer again if Director Thompson would like to talk about how this has impacted her ability to hire in the city. This is a substance, a legal substance now that is as commonly used as alcohol. And on one hand, we're allowing people to drink wine and beer and other alcohol beverages during non-work hours. And if they behave out of the ordinary, then we can test them, which is essentially all this would do for cannabis. So we'd be putting this in line with how we treat another legal substance, Illinois alcohol. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that, because I'd rather hold this and have people get their questions answered than you to vote on something without understanding exactly what we're trying to do here. Whether Chicago does it or not, there's plenty of things that Chicago is doing that I don't think are in line with our values here in the city of Evanston. And this is 100% disrupting our ability to provide job opportunities for groups that we all say that we want to serve, and that there's a tremendous gap in serving this particular community. So I think we need to update this. But I just want to make sure everybody answers all their questions. And again, I'd rather hold this than to somebody to vote if their question wasn't answered.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn? Aye. Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
I guess I got their questions answered, Councilmember. With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, item A10 passes. Councilmember Reed, would you like to make a motion on A12?
I move item A9, ordinance 42022, amending Title VII, Chapter 12 of the City Code concerning failure to pay delinquent charges.
I said A12.
I move item A12, ordinance 42022, amending portions of Title VII, Chapter 8, will tax of the City Code.
Title 10.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves item A12. Councilmember Newsma seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
No.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
No.
Councilmember Wynn?
No.
Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
With 5 voting in favor and 4 voting against, item A12 passes. Councilmember Kelly?
Sorry, I apologize. I wanted to second, may I circle back to second item A10?
A9.
I'm not, I mean A9, I'm sorry, regarding water shutoffs. I apologize.
I mean, I
You
think
can move it. You have the floor.
the
You can move it. You
that
have
is
the
true.
floor.
You do have the floor. I suppose you can make the motion. If you would like to make the motion, you can make the motion.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to move item A9.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Kelly moves item A9. Councilmember Reed seconds. Is there any discussion? We begin with Councilmember Kelly.
I'm going to let Councilmember Reed lead on that.
All right, Councilmember Reed?
Thank you. So this is a referral to end the practice of shutting off water for residents who have delinquent bills. I want to, these are folks, this is, water is a critical source of sustenance that people need to live. You can't live more than a few days without water. I want to remind us that the average, or if I can have staff, Director Stoneback or whoever's prepared to answer a few quick questions, what is the average overdue bill? A few $100s? Is that roundabout correct? The average of the past due bill?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. Dave Stoneback, Public Works Director. I don't have that information on me, sir.
So we don't have the information of what a average
Average
overdue
bill is, no. In the memo,
Overdue
I talked
bill.
about what the 10 highest ones are, but I don't have in my knowledge right now what the average bill is, no.
Okay. But it's
Hold
usually
on.
just,
Hold on, I got it, actually. Give me a second to get back to AMPW notes.
while we're looking for that, is it true that Chicago and a number of other cities across our country no longer shut off water?
Chicago does. Detroit has resumed shutting off water, so has Philadelphia, and I'm not sure where Seattle is. But most of them are starting to shut water off again.
But, okay, I'm sorry, that wasn't, but the question is, there are a number of communities in our nation that do not shut off water as a practice for folks who are past due who have delinquent bills.
As I'm aware, there's only one community, Chicago, that does it, for sure. That's the only one I know for sure.
Okay. And do you know, what is our compliance rate with water bills?
I don't understand the question.
So for our will tax, we have a compliance rate of about 80%, right? 80% of the people pay the tax. So what's the compliance rate for water bills?
I would say I'm guessing somewhere around 96%.
So 96% of people comply with paying the water bill. And thank you, Director Stumbeck. Those are the questions right now that I have. I want to remind folks, this is, again, we're talking about water. We have businesses that we are all aware of, that every one of us should be aware of, that did not pay the city $500,000 in hotel motel tax. Did we shut off any services to that business? Did we tell that business that they no longer could receive city services? No. We have people who don't pay fines and fees all the time for things more critical or for things not as critical as water. Do we shut off services for folks who don't pay those bills? No. This is a moral decision. We can figure out a way to get compliance with folks paying their water bill without taking a barbaric step of shutting off water to people. I would really like folks who have a concern with this to levy their concerns, right? If you're just not a barbarian that wants to shut off water to people, I'd like you to state clearly on the record what your concern with trying a different approach that has shown in Chicago to not blow the entire system up. Right? Chicago's budget hasn't had a huge hole blown in it because they switched to putting liens against properties. For folks who look at this and are scared about putting a lien, when folks don't pay, folks have property standards violations that can cause actual life and safety issues. Currently, we don't even tell landlords that if you're not paying your overdue fines that we're going to stop you from being able to rent. But a poor person that can't afford water, we shut off their water if they're a few $100s behind. I need folks to state why they wouldn't support this and what your better proposal is that does not end up with folks having water shut off. Thank you.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
So those that are listening, I just want to clarify a couple of things. I get exhausted by the theatrics sometimes. We get 90% compliancy in terms of the water rate. For those residents that do find themselves in the situation where water bills and or any other utilities, electric, gas, we have an excellent service called General Assistance, then run by our staff, where residents are provided assistance. Our city staff also does an exceptional job of working with residents and also businesses who from time to time find themselves in life circumstances to give them time to to pay down their water bill. I'm exhausted by the theatrics, and this is wasting our time. And I'm now ready to vote. Thank you.
Seeing no one else asking to speak. No one else is asking to speak for a first time, so we'll go to second rounds. Councilmember Reed with a minute and a half left.
Anyone who thinks that shutting off water to human beings is theatrics, that there's something theatrical about that, that is an insane statement. State your concerns. State what you're worried about. Don't try to deflect with saying that this is theatrics. State what you are concerned about. And you bring up that we have these other programs that are available. Last time we checked in committee, 17 Evanstonians were signed up for those programs. 17. We know there are more than 17 people in our community that are struggling. And maybe the number has shifted a bit now. Maybe it's 100 people are signed up. Hopefully, maybe I don't even know if we're there yet. But this is not theatrical. This is a moral decision that we choose when it's a resident who is behind on their water bill, we choose to shut off. When Margarita Inn doesn't pay $500,000 in taxes, we still provide them services. In fact, we give them a break during a period when they would not have been able to receive revenue. So this is not theatrical. This is a moral decision. This will not lose the city money. We can do this in a more humane and effective way. Show where you really stand on issues of equity with this vote. I call the question.
All right, Councilmember Reed moves the question. Is there a second?
To call the question?
Yeah.
Well, I'll remove that. If there's no one else talking, we don't need to go through the process. So,
Councilmember Reed moves the question. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Let me see if I can get this right for once in my life. It's a non-debatable motion. So would the clerk please call the roll on the motion to call the question?
I'm also taking notes, sorry. Councilmember Suffredin.
Yes.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
aye.
Councilmember Hidakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries with 9 voting in favor, none voting against. Now would the clerk please call the roll on the underlying question, ordinance 48-0-22?
Councilmember Suffredin.
No.
Councilmember Ravel.
No.
Councilmember Reed.
Yes.
Councilmember Hidakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. No. Councilmember Wynn. No. Councilmember Newsma.
No.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
With 4 voting in favor and 5 voting against, item A9 does not pass. This brings us to item HC1. Councilmember Ravel, would you like to make a motion on this item?
Sure. Find the right page. I move approval of $200,000 of home investment partnership funding for the tenant-based rental assistance program.
Councilmember Ravel moves item HC1. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Kelly.
I would like to hear some response to the concerns that were expressed by Ms. Payton this evening regarding some unresolved issues involving, I guess, this money would be allocated to connections, correct? I mean, I just think in due diligence from the city that we should ensure that this situation has been rectified before moving forward. I would like to hold it until we can be assured that this situation is resolved. Or at least get a response next time, unless there can be a response now. Sarah, maybe you can address this. It just sounds like a very, very, very serious concern that should be addressed. And I would prefer to allocate funding knowing that this situation has in fact been but it sounds like it hasn't been resolved.
I'm just going to chime in here. I don't know that Sarah Flax has the knowledge about the situation of Ms. Payton's home to speak on that. But if you have questions regarding this grant, she can certainly answer that.
To the best of my knowledge, the tenants that are referred to in this discussion and with Ms. Payton's property, Sarah Flax, Housing and Grants Manager, are not members or not in the TBRA program. This program serves households with children in our public schools who are unstably housed or have been homeless, and I don't believe, I understand the concerns about the situation, and I'll be happy to talk to Ms. Payton and work to find out more about it and resolve it. But I don't believe that it should hold up this particular funding, because this is an important program that continues to keep our families with children in the schools that are, in many cases, going into the summer is a key time that we can get them enrolled in TBRA, because if they cannot find places to stay, then they end up falling out of the Evanston schools because they are no longer residents. And that is a concern of Connections and of the city. And I absolutely think I will be happy to look into the issue that Ms. Payton is talking about. But
thank you. I just think it is the same organization, and I'm not saying that we need to be funding other organizations, but since it is the same organization where this issue was, I think due diligence as a city before giving out money, we should ensure that this has been resolved, since we're talking about giving it to the same agency.
There are situations where you have individual clients of Connections that are not, or any social services agency that is dealing with people who have been living in very difficult situations, and yes, there are some who make really very bad decisions. But I personally do not think that others should be necessarily kept from getting services as a result of that, as long as we look into and address that problem.
Is there someone here from Connections who could address the issue that Ms. Payton brought up this evening?
I personally don't know what program or who the people were, and I will have to look into it and find out more information.
So there is no one here from Connections this evening? No.
Look out in the audience.
Oh,
Nope. No.
Councilmember Ravel.
So my understanding is the same as Sarah Flax, that this is that the TBRA program is separate from the program that Connections used to help the resident in Ms. Payton's apartment find that apartment. So I too would really hate to hold up the funding for the TBRA program. I mean, we have just a brief summary of the impact of the TBRA program on the families that have been in the program the last 2 years. And I mean, the most impressive part I find is 100% of the children served in the program have advanced to the next grade level. I mean, that really shows that the housing stability that the program provides is really meeting the goal of helping all those children advance in school and, be on the path to, a more successful future. So I'm super supportive of the TBRA program.
And Ms. Flex, I'm sorry, did someone have sorry.
So since no one who's not spoken yet is requesting to speak, we'll go back to Councilmember Kelly I seem to have written this down with a very high degree of precision, with 3 minutes and 37 seconds left.
All right. So between Ms. Flax and Daniel, Mayor Biss, can you both get involved to resolve this issue? It seems it's incredibly serious, and I think if I'm understanding correctly, this means we have affordable units that are currently not being rented to low-income families, and I know families that are looking for homes. So I think this merits urgent attention. So I would just like to know that going forward, I'll vote for this, but I would like to know, since we're on this topic, that this will be addressed.
So I'll answer. As you know, I visited Ms. Payton's unit with you. I've spoken with her a couple times since then. I'm happy to engage in this. I certainly don't have the magical powers to solve problems, but I'm happy to continue to be engaged in this. I think the city manager wanted to speak to this as well.
Sure. We be glad to talk further with Ms. Payton. I spoke with Ms. Payton about a week and a half ago at the second ward meeting. We will figure out what her particular situation is and what has been her underlying concerns with regard to connections. But with regard to this particular item, I think Ms. Flax's knowledge is just squared away on this item with regard to this grant. And I want to separate the two issues because they are two separate issues.
Councilmember Nusma.
I want to separate the two issues as well. I've met with Ms. Payton myself on several occasions, willing to do whatever it takes to help her and the city and Connections work through this process. But what is in front of us tonight is unrelated to Ms. Payton's dilemma, her problem. So I'm looking forward to voting on this.
Seeing no one else requesting to speak, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed. Aye. Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, item HC1 passes. This brings us to item F1. Councilmember Nguyen, would you like to make a motion here?
Yes, staff recommends approval of ordinance 26022, authorizing the city manager to increase the total fiscal year 2021 budget by $11,554,473. I move approval.
Second.
Councilmember Nguyen moves item F1. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed, followed by Kelly.
I'll defer to Councilmember Kelly first.
So could, just some clarification. So I understand there's, we went over budget in some funds by 11.5 million, yet there was a surplus that far exceeded that. So when we increase and amend the budget by that amount to 307 million, where are we taking that 11.5 from? Since we did have a surplus, is there a breakdown as to where we're taking that?
From the general fund.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. So the City Council is just authorizing the increase in the budget. There is no transfer from other funds. So it's just increasing from the existing originally passed amount of $296 million to $307 million.
Right, but since we don't need revenue for that, I mean, we're not issuing additional levy, where does that come from, that 11.5?
It's just that, like as I said, the year is over. 2021 is over. City is not going to spend any more money. So it is just then, like as I said, academic thing to kind of say that, okay, City Council approved the budget. So the only impact I see right now is in our audit report, the auditors would say that we have so-and-so funds over budget. That's the only thing I see. And sometimes it's a concern for the rating agencies that why didn't City Council authorize the increased amount? But there is no actual expenditure going to happen as the year is already over.
Okay, but I mean, it still has to come from somewhere, the increase.
No, it doesn't come.
If I could interject, I mean, I think there's a bit of passing a budget doesn't create money, it creates the authorization to spend the money. The money was spent, and it came in pursuant to our regular tax revenues, and we're simply retrospectively authorizing ourselves to have spent it, but the money was there to be spent because it came in the regular way revenue.
Right, but it came in, but there was surplus. I'm not arguing against amending this, but I'm just saying when you allocate that amount more for last year's budget, we still nevertheless have to account for it somewhere. I'm just wondering, you don't have to tell me now, but it has to be accounted for somewhere.
It came out of the fund balance.
Which fund balance? That's what I'm saying. Which
General
fund?
fund.
It came out of the general fund.
Here's the thing, yes. Let me just, it's not coming out of anywhere. Like, just think as of originally you had approved $307 million budgets. It's like that. And again, as I said, if you ask me, okay, what would be the consequence? I'm going to the worst case, that if you don't approve, I would see a comment in my audit report from the auditors that we found certain funds over budget. Now, I don't know, I haven't heard much from the rating agencies in the past because we have always had a tradition of doing the budget amendment. But many years back, yes, we used to have some funds which would go over budget and it would be part of the audit report. So that's the kind of consequence I see right now.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle. We talk a lot here about our form of government and the powers and duties, and I'm specifically mentioning this to Nick, so I'm going to let, because it's a legal question, so sorry, Claire, for interrupting. But we talk a lot here about our form of government and who has what authority and who, the authority is the city managers and what authority is the councils. And, we talk a lot about rules here too and following them to the T. So Article 5 of the Municipal Code, Article 5, Division 3, talks about what the city council has the authority to do. And my concern here is that monies were authorized and spent. Monies were spent and not authorized by the city council. Not the full 11 million, but if we look at it, there's about 2 to 3 million of it that was spent without the authorization of the city council.
Is that directed at me or to?
I'm sorry, the question isn't there yet, but if I'm wrong on anything, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Am I wrong about my interpretation? I'll ask this question. Is my interpretation that the city council has to approve all expenditures of the city, all money leaving the city coffers? Is that an accurate description of what the state law says?
That's both an accurate description of the state law and what happened.
So it's an accurate description of the state law. Hitesh, because we went through this before, and so it's an accurate description of the state law. Thank you, Law Department, for answering that portion. The second portion that is for the finance director is, were there monies that were spent, that were expended, that the council did not authorize before they were being spent?
What's the question?
Is there a single dollar? Is there $400,000 from the fire department? Is there $100,000 here, $400,000 there? Are there monies that were expended from the city coffers that had not at the time that they were expended, approved by the city council?
I don't think so, considering the past practice and tradition. Like suppose there is a contract approved by the city council at that time for $1 million for something else.
If I can interject to be
Sure.
specific and to just save time. So, for example, again, fire department is great. I don't know if the chief is here, so not really picking on it. It's just, it really stuck out in my head. $400,000 in overtime for the fire department. I think a service that we'd all agree that is necessary and that we would have voted to approve. I would have voted to approve it. But did the council approve that $400,000 in overtime expense?
Again, the city council approves the budget at fund level. So city council does not approve the budget like overtime. And again, I mean, I'm not sure, I can check. Fire department is under budget as a whole, as a department level. So they have a savings in salaries, but they are over in overtime because of some vacancies. And when you approve the budget as a city council, it is adopted at the fund level. And city manager can transfer the funds within the funds, but city manager cannot transfer the funds between two different funds. So again, the whole thing, the unit of approval from the city council is at the fund level, not at the department level, not at the business unit level.
So then we're not approving going over budget for the fire department.
No, I'm talking about as a general fund as a whole. That's where I came to number that, okay, general fund is over by these dollars.
I really feel like there's like some, either we're missing each other, there's something not hitting here, because I'm just looking for a clear answer. For a number of expenses that were listed there at the top, for example, the overage in the city manager's office, are we going over what the city council authorized for the general fund expenditure for 2021?
Correct, as a whole.
We're going over.
As a whole.
As a whole.
Right.
Okay, and so there are expenditures, such as the expenditures in the city manager's office, in the fire department, in the health department, $400,000 in the health department. Again, all things that we think are important and would approve, very likely, that went over budget, and the council is just now approving that overage. Is that correct?
No. And I would differ in the sense that every bills list, every council meeting, you get the bills
But you're going to go to the bills list thing. We've
The
talked about that.
payroll.
But the bills list, the city manager's office going over budget, the fire department going over budget, the health department going over budget does not appear on the bills list. So we can.
No, you approve the payroll too as a whole. The payroll and bills list. So we submit both the numbers with the bills list, payroll. And in the past, at least my experience for last 10 years, I would bring up the big amount, even like any contracts or service. The city council approved, say, $100,000 or $500,000. And I always do, whoever the finance director, we would do the budget amendment at the end of the year, because so many times it has happened that fund is still under budget because we have savings in other line items, in other areas, in other services supplies. So that's why we wait until the year end to see whether the fund is over the budget instead of one line item.
Okay, thank you. I'll just end with this. I'll say thank you to Councilmember Kelly for leading on some efforts to create better budget controls, and to the entire council for creating the Finance and Budget Committee. I think that's a good step, a step in the right direction to begin to get better controls over our budget, to ensure that we are spending the taxpayers' dollars in a manner that is consistent with our values, and that we are following the law and approving expenditures on behalf of the taxpayers. I thank you for your explanation, Hitesh. Again, I'll just thank you, Councilmember Kelly. I think what we really need to do here is have better controls and how we are reported to and when we are heading over budget. And I know we discussed this at the last meeting. I'm glad that those reform, and I thank Kelly as well, Interim Manager Gandersky, for also accepting those recommendations, many of them. So I yield.
So with no one else seeking to speak for the first time, we'll go back to Councilmember Kelly with 4 minutes left.
I am also very pleased that going forward, we will know of projected surpluses, which are very important, as well as potential projected over expenditures. It's important that council also has that discussion about where, if we're overspending, if we approve it, we have to understand the urgency and the unexpected nature of it to approve it. And I am glad to see in item A6, which I didn't talk about, but and I don't want to go back to it, but I appreciate that it's, that you've mentioned here that about the crossing guards, that this would require a budget amendment or other funding. So I appreciate that that's in here, very much so. I would just ask that as we look at this, that we discuss where that funding would come from, if we can do that before spending. I think that's really key, if that's possible. So thank you. I just want to mention that. I appreciate seeing that. Thank you.
Seeing no one else seeking to speak, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Heracadis.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, item F1 passes. The last item on our agenda is item F2, which is a discussion. Kelly Kandersky?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Members of City Council, last fall when we were discussing additional positions that I had requested on behalf of staff that go into the budget because we were woefully understaffed in certain departments, I did promise to come back before the July 1st date where we agreed to hold some positions vacant that were newly approved to come back with a budget update. So as long as we're talking about all things budget, I've asked CFO Decide to prepare a short discussion on where we are year to date as promised. So Hitesh, can you lead the discussion, please?
Thank you, Manager Gendersky, Mayor of the City Council. So yeah, if you can bring up the presentation, I would be quick to kind of go through the presentation, and if you like, you can ask the question at that time or at the end. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So this is the financials as of March 31st, and you see the revenues for the year to date, expenses, the net result, the fund balance and cash balance. Most important for all of you, or the general fund, we are doing pretty good. Again, some of those major revenues are not actual, like sales tax, use tax. We have a 3-month lag. So sometimes, we have to use the estimate. So, but again, I think the next quarter when I do more media, we would have a lot more actual revenues. But we are doing pretty good. I would get to the highlights, but nothing concerning with any of the funds. We have a lot of money. The one reason is we received the first installment of property tax, and that's why we have these are the other funds. Again, you would see the very first line item, the debt service, where we have the property tax money. So we have received a lot of money there because of the first installment. These are the budget to actual, that how we are doing as compared to the budget. So you see in general fund, we are at 36% compared to 25%, And again, this is because of the property tax money, which we received almost over 50%. Same thing with some of the other funds you see on the top, debt service, Howard Ridge, West Evanston, TIF, where we got the property tax money. And again, the same thing, the tax levy first installment money is the factor for all those, revenues being higher. These are the expense side, how we are doing on the expense side, budget to actual. General fund, 27% compared to a target of 25%, and that is because of, again, the property tax. We have a mechanism where we have to show the police and fire property tax as a revenue in general fund as well as the expense in general fund. And later, in the slide, I'll show you without the pension expense where we stand in general fund. Not much, we would have many funds where we would have the expenses or bills. During the second quarter, third quarter, when particularly the capital projects were done. These are the financials, some of those revenues which I've highlighted by the categories. You see property tax money at 52% of the budget because of the first installment and some of those other revenues. So we are at 36% overall revenues. And so, which is, yeah, we are doing pretty good as a whole.
Hitesh, on the other revenue line here, it shows we're already at 90% of the budget, not even halfway through the year. What is the projection for the rest of the year?
That could, I mean, it could go up. I mean, there could be one big item where we, like some of those grants or intergovernment, yes. So, but again, yeah, I mean, I would have more kind of at the mid-year, when I do the second quarter, I would have more kind of projections through the year end.
Hitesh, I have a few questions too, since we're just jumping in. I had a question about the water fund. It was a few. What was the estimated or the budgeted revenue for the water fund?
Let's see. Budgeted revenue for water fund is 53 million. Again, 53 million includes almost $25 million in IEPA loans and bonds. So it's like, yeah, you have to kind of keep in mind that because of that, the number looks artificially so.
Are we typically do we typically receive our budgeted projections for the water fund?
Yes. Right around, depending on the first quarter, we might be a little under because of the January and February, but I think we would catch up in the next months.
Okay, so we're usually on par there. That's great to know. And then for the reparations fund, I saw that it's at 1% of budget.
Yeah, so the reparations fund, I think the money went out, the disbursement, in April. So you would see in the next quarter presentation, or even my April financials, when I post it on the website and send it to the council, you would see some expenses there.
The expenditures there. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let me go back to the, again, yeah, the budgeted expense for the other fund, debt service funds, some of the TIF funds, you see that? Yep. We haven't made any interest or principal payment yet, so that's why you don't see any expense in debt service, and all of the TIF funds, some of the major CIP funds or the infrastructure projects, yeah, that would come later in the year. These are some of those, top revenues. As I said, 36% of the revenue, so we are doing pretty good. These are the expenditure by department in the general fund, and you would see that most of them at target overall 27%. I mentioned the reason that the pensions are the big kind of driving force, which is not a true operating expense. And you would see that the non-departmental, that is the item, which is a pension amount. So we took it out of police and fire to have a better picture. And other than that, only thing you see the department is the health department, but that's because of the COVID-19 expenses, which is fully reimbursed. So we have higher revenues too on the health department and little higher expenses. So these are the revenue highlights, which I thought that I bring it to. I think I already covered about the property tax things. Major revenues like sales tax, income tax, use tax, building permits, transport tax are at or above target. So we are doing pretty good, and I think we would continue to improve there. Water sewer operating revenues, they are on target, but overall revenues low because of no IEPA loan and bond revenues yet. Parking revenues, we think that, it could go up later this year. We'll continue to keep an eye on that, how we do. On the expense side, general fund expense at 27% because of the police and fire pension. If we take the pension out of 11.4 million, the expenses are at 17%. So that's well within our target of 25%. I talked about health department because of the COVID-19. Water, sewer, and CIP funds low because of all the capital project expense, which would occur later year. Fuel cost, that's the thing. Everybody, we feel this thing in an individual capacity too. So, and if that continues, we might go over the budget. And I think we could come back to the council mid-year after we would have a better idea, right around July, that where we stand and what is our projected expenditure for the year. Special service areas expenses, we received the money, and you would see the expense sometime in the month of May when we give that money back to the special service. TIF funds, special assessment funds, again, expense on projects later this year. And insurance fund is a little higher because of the one-time annual premium we pay for the entire year, but it is charged in the month of January, so we are a little higher there. This is the one just to bring it to the city councils. I saw this thing a couple of months ago that Cook County, they say, yeah, the bills could be out as late as 6 months. I mean, it has never happened, at least in last 10 years, I don't remember. One time it was like 2 months late. But again, yeah, I mean, I can assure the city council that we have enough cash, we have enough revenues, all other home rule taxes and other taxes, they are trending at or above the target. So I don't see any problem, but just to bring it to the city council's attention. That's it, yeah, any questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. This is really, really important, helpful information. That then brings us to call of the wards. Councilmember Revelle.
No report.
Councilmember Reed.
We have a 8th Ward meeting, our monthly ward meeting, this Thursday at 6 p.m. Virtually via Zoom, and we'll be talking about a number of issues, and the newsletter will likely go out tomorrow, so I'll see Tina and others maybe on the 8th Ward meeting on Thursday. Thank you.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
I'm very sorry. There's one announcement there to the ward meeting. Specifically, we are going to have, and apologies, we're going to have a group on talking about ranked choice voting. So we're going to have Elisa Kaplan and the team at Fair Vote on to talk about ranked choice voting. Thank you.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Just a reminder, first Thursday of the month will be the 9th Ward meeting. And I'm not one to make statements, but I just wanted to weigh in and say something about the incident in Haven. Obviously, it's super disturbing, act of violence towards the kids there. And I think as a community, we have to hold ourselves accountable. And when you hear people trying to minimize it, I think it's up to people to do better and educate themselves and work to eliminate this racism from our community.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. I'd just like to express my deep condolences to Councilmember Braithwaite for the loss of his mother. I know how difficult that is. Thank you for being here, and nothing else to report. Thank you.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, as well as thank you, Councilmember Kelly. And on behalf of my family, I'd like to thank our friends and members of the community, as well as our community partners, just for your expressions of condolences during this time of loss. And the details of the arrangements will come out shortly. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, first, I too would like to offer my sincere condolences to Councilmember Braithwaite and the entire Braithwaite family. Second, this coming Thursday is the 3rd Ward Town Hall meeting. We'll be in person at Lincoln School from 7 to 8:30 p.m., and I look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will also offer public condolences to Councilmember Braithwaite, having already done so in private. Looking forward to the 4th Ward schedule, Tuesday, June 7th will be our ward meeting, 7 p.m. at Robert Crown. On the agenda next month will be the Vogue Project. I'll also be briefing the ward on the latest regarding Albany Care. I have office hours Saturday, June 11th, 10 to noon at Berry Pike Cafe.
Councilmember Burns.
Councilmember Braithwaite, condolences, brother. This is obviously a huge loss for you, as it is for all of us who lose people close to us. And I know your family and you have been dealing with this for a while, and yet you've remained steadfast in your service to the second ward as well as the city. And tremendous props for that, man, and condolences to you and your family. We're with you. Wanted to announce the next Fifth Ward meeting Thursday, May 26th at 7 p.m. Again, last Thursday of every month, we have our Fifth Ward night. A few topics for discussion. We'll talk about John Fournier, our new city manager, and in the city manager search process. And we'll have kind of an open Q&A so people can ask away any questions that they have. We'll also do an update regarding the 2022 E-Plan that highlights at this point is highlighting the health inequities and economic disparities throughout Evanston within the plan has pays special attention, unfortunately, to 8092, which is a census tract in the Fifth Ward. So I think those in the ward will be interested to hear about that update from Kristen Mayer, who's our community health specialist. We'll have an important update regarding the Evanston One-Stop Housing Retrofit Pilot Program, which aims to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing through energy efficiency home improvements. Our guest speakers are Robinson Marcus, who's a worker owner and general manager of Evanston Development Cooperative, and Bob Dean, CEO for Center for Neighborhood Technology. I also want to invite Evanston's Black community out to a town hall recognizing our Black community voice tomorrow from 6:30 to 8:30 at First Church of God, 1524 Simpson Street, Evanston, Illinois. And I'll read a bit of what went out in my Fifth Ward newsletter today. The city is hosting several community events to gather feedback from residents on what qualities they'd like to see in Evanston's next police chief, recognizing that members of the Black community have a unique and critical perspective. And in order to create a space conducive to having a productive, comfortable conversation, the city will be hosting a community meeting focused on the Black perspective tomorrow, May 24th at 6:30 p.m., First Church of God. During the meeting, there will be a facilitated discussion and breakout groups. Childcare will be provided. I'll be in attendance, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
Councilmember Herragaris.
I just realized I forgot to announce that we're having a similar meeting for the Latino community at St. Nick's Church tomorrow. I'll have the information here. It is town hall meeting at 6:30 at St. Nick's, also to discuss the police chief search.
Thank you. I also want to share my deepest condolences with Councilmember Braithwaite and your whole family. I do think it's really, it really speaks volumes for your commitment to this community that you're even able to be here tonight at all. I think it's really a remarkable testament, and just know that all of us here are thinking of you and your whole family and surrounding you with love and lifting you up in this difficult time. With that, Councilmember Newsom is recognized for a motion.
I'm sorry, I didn't know we were publicly doing that because from my knowledge, hadn't been announced to the public, so I just want to also add my condolences. Haven't had a chance to really see you, but we've shuffled past each other earlier, so unlike many members of this council, I don't know what that kind of loss feels like yet. I have no clue, but I can imagine it's a powerful one, so I'll just echo the fact that you're here speaks testament, so thank you.
Councilmember Newsom.
Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding the purchase or use of real property and setting the price of sale or lease of property owned by the city. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A, sections C5 and C6.
Councilmember Newsman moves that we resolve into executive session. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns. Is he still there?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes. And at 9:11 p.m., for the second time in one evening, the City Council resolves into an executive session to begin immediately in the Aldermanic Library.